Hey guys, this is ZMH Tech here, and today we're going to cover how to bake textures in Blender. Now, uh, there's really there's really two reasons why you want to bake textures in Blender. Number one is just if you're working in Blender, no game engines, just Blender. Sometimes if you have a lot of procedural textures and you're rendering, like let's just say this table and this floor were procedural, and I'm trying to work on the cube. If these were like advanced procedurals, they may take a while on to render. So instead of making a change, then clicking render and waiting, what I can do is I can bake out the texture of the floor and the table and convert them basically to an image texture. That way, when I can put the image texture on them, and then basically they'll load a lot quicker. And then, of course, at my very final render, I may take the images off, or animations. That's another great thing. Since it has to render, the scene over and over and over and over again, you may just want to do convert all the procedurals to images at the end. That way, it speeds up animations. So that's one thing. The second thing, which is what I used it for mostly when I was building Large Dog VR Studio, which I make Blender animations and HTC Vive Unity video games. What I was using it for was basically in the baseball game that I was actually making. I was using it for how to, and that'll be available eventually on largedogvrstudio.com. But I was using it basically how do you build something in Blender, and then how do you get that to look the same or almost the same in Unity? Now basically, what can you bake and what you can't bake. Basically, what can you bake is anything that's diffuse in nature, basically in the color. So like a couch maybe, or an interior wall, stuff like that's going to work really good. Things that will kind of work and may look a tad different is like reflective stuff, so like a shiny gold or something like that. It'll probably work, but it'll just look a little different. And then things that absolutely will not work is anything that has to do with how the engine perceives light or how the camera perceives light. So basically, water and glass will absolutely not work. Cycles perceives that way differently than, let's just say, Unity. So they're not gonna know if you bake out glass in Unity. I mean, in Blender, what you're gonna get is it's kind of like a gray type looking texture. So those things won't work. So keep those limitations in mind. Okay, so what we did was I set up a little table here. Yeah, I know it's totally edges overlapping. But this is not a modeling tutorial. So anyways, I set up a table of cube to demonstrate this baking. I gave it texture, as you can see. Just went with a brown and a blue. And if you just want to look real quick how I did that, was basically, let me remove these real quick. I was previously when I was testing stuff. Actually, yeah. Okay, so let me make it real quick. That was actually the image I was testing this on before. So let me just make some real quick. So for this, we'll just do brown, brown color. That's not brown. This is good. This is it's a hexadecimal color for brown. And then on this little cube thing, we can get a little fancy here. I'm not going to do, maybe eventually I'll do a procedural tutorial, but I'm not the greatest at it, so I won't bore you with the information and waste your time. Basically, just the very basics of it is if we wanted to make it kind of a little glossy, a little plasticky type deal, we can change these to blue. And then can mix these two together. Then we'll give it a little bit more glossy. And then quick lighting. Just basically you can take a plane, put it on the bottom of your things, then just take a sun and make that like a 4 or 5. It's not the greatest lighting, but it will do for a little tutorial test like this. So if I'm just telling you how to replicate what I've got basically on the screen here. So we got our table and our cube. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to bake these, and I'm going to show you different little things you need to basically know. So let's say you want to bake this cube out first. And obviously all my pieces are separated. It's usually how models are. Everything's split up. So what we'll do is we'll use the cube first. So you're basically, very first thing you need to do is basically, it has to be UV unwrapped. And the quick way is, I know there's a more advanced way, but a quick way of doing it is just let Blender do it for you. So basically you're going to hit, well, you can hit tab if you want, but you're going to go into edit mode on the object. So make sure object, which is a cube, was selected. Go to edit mode. And then, I don't know why it's doing that. Select the whole thing. And then you're going to go to UV image editor. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hit, we're going to press U on the keyboard. And then we're going to hit Smart UV Project. And then hit OK. And then that's going to give us basically, now don't worry about this was just from a previous test. It'll change, it shouldn't have any color. It should just have the squares and a black image. We're going to hit new image. Now you're going to name it. So let's name it cube. And I think, actually I'm going to have to go in here. These will be the final results, basically. One's just the cube baked, one's with the cube and the table baked out. So we'll just name it cube 2, 1024 by 1024. Now that's a resolution of your texture. So, like if you were doing it for like a Android, maybe a mobile Unity game, maybe 1024 would be the high end. 512 would be good. If you're doing it for a PC game, obviously like maybe 4K, the high end. Now, when you're doing textures, you want to make them a square. So like if, let's just say you want to do 4K, don't do, I think it's 3840 by 2160. That's 4K resolution, but don't actually do that. You're gonna, if you want 4K, you're gonna do 4096 by 4096. So you'll scale those depending on whatever resolution you're gonna pick. But It needs to be a square. So 1024 is fine. So this is what you should have right now. So then we're going to go save, and then we're going to save that image, and it's just going to be black. Then what we're going to do is you're going to go into back to properties. Then you're going to click on, make sure that your material is selected, and then you're going to go to the node editor. Oh yeah, one important thing I forgot is you need to be in Cycles Render to do this. Blender Render, Blender Game, Cycles Render has to be in Cycles Render to be able to do all this. So if you have a Blender Render project, most of the times you can just switch it and it should work fine. Sometimes it won't though, but make sure you're in Cycles Render to do all this. It won't work in the other ones. So what you're going to do is basically on your advanced little procedural that you made or whatever, on that material, you're going to hit Shift A. That's how I get this box open. I think you can just hit Add too. But I like to do Shift A. And then search, and you're just going to look for an image texture, hit Enter, and you're not going to connect this to anybody on your texture that you made, but you're going to open the black or the blank image you just made, and then you're going to go to Properties, the Camera tab. Now up here, obviously these settings, if you want to watch a detailed tutorial on these render settings, just click on my channel and look for the there'll be something called like Blender how to render, the complete tutorial or something like that. I go over basically all these settings. I had to learn that for Large Dog VR Studio. But anyways, we'll pick GPU, and then none of these matter for baking except for these three, and this is usually closed, the bake tab. That's it. So for baking, all you need to worry about is the bake, and then these three up here. So for bake, normally what it would have is, since I was messing around with this, this is basically what yours should look like right now. And this was the part where I had to look through multiple different tutorials and kind of mess around with it to figure out what worked. This is probably the main reason why I'm making this tutorial. A lot of people are just saying to do diffuse and stuff, but that didn't seem to work for me. Basically, you want to do basically what it says, combined. Now here's the thing: if you're just doing this for basically Blender and then you're going to reuse that texture for Blender, you're going to want all these checked on combined, because what that's going to do is basically it's going to make it look identical, which is obviously what you want, because you're going to be reusing it in the Blender. But if you're going to be doing it for like Unity or something, you don't want it to look exactly the same. That's because if you made it exactly the same, it would take the lighting from Blender and everything else, the diffuse and whatever, and then it would put it in Unity, which has its own lighting, and then there'd be two different light sources basically on your image, so it would look really weird. So basically, how do you get it to look the same? Basically, is you want to basically uncheck almost everything on here. You want to leave AO. This is basically like, I don't know, it's hard to explain this, but it's like indirect light, basically. That it works very well. And then you're also going to want to take away all these. Glossy is, you can play around with glossy. Sometimes on like metals and stuff, you'll want it. Sometimes you don't want it. But your two core things are diffuse and AO. You definitely want those. Everything else you can kind of play around with, see what you get, but basically you want those two. So then we're just going to press bake, and we're going to wait for it to bake. Up here it's telling you, how fast, or what, the progress. Okay. Then that tells you to save it. So basically, that's what we're going to do. Go back to that UV image editor. And now what you should see is color. If you don't, and sometimes like 1 out of 10 times that will happen, I'll just see the black image again. That means you did something wrong in the steps. So you're going to want to just redo the steps that I just showed you how to do. But you're looking for some type of color thing to show it worked. So it kind of worked. So then what you're going to do is you're going to go save the image. You could just do save image. I usually just do save image as. Then down here you can change if you want the compression and all that. Just leave everything by default right now. And then what we're going to do is we're done with the cube. So we're going to go back. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to do a multiple objects. Now, personally, I like to do them separately. So I would do like the cube, and then I would join these together. When we get out of back into object mode, I would join obviously the legs to the table, and then just do the table by itself. But when do you want to decide what you're going to do? Basically, if let's say that my cube was going to move, like if my character in my game was going to pick up the cube and move it around or something, I probably just would want to do them separately, then the table to the cube. But if like my cube and my table were just some kind of static like object in my scene, then I'd probably just do the whole thing, combine them all and do them together. So basically, I'm going to show you how to do that as well real quick. So we're basically going to select everybody that you want to combine. You're going to have to join them together as one object. Now, you're going to press T on the keyboard to get this thing, and you're going to press join. And now, as you can see, this thing, I don't think we did that right, obviously. Oh, no, we didn't. Okay. Oh, we forgot to do the, forgot to click that. Okay, so we're going to hit join. And now you can see the whole thing's joined. Okay. So now we're going to do basically the same thing, but why am I going to show you this again? Because there's something I need to point out here. On this object, we have two materials, obviously, now, because we had that brown table and that blue plastic cube. Now, if your object, it doesn't matter if you just joined them. Let's just say it was the cube, and we had, steel on the top and, blue on the sides. If your object has more than one material, when you add that little image texture node, you're going to have to do that for every material in your object that you're baking. So basically, I'll show you what happens if you get an error. So we're going to go into that. Now, again, you're going to have to press A on that keyboard to highlight everybody. I guess we can go to UV Imager real quick. And what you're gonna do is Smart UV Project again. You're gonna want to do it again because you obviously you combined them, so it's a different object. Then we're gonna go to New Image. That misspelled table. No. Okay. So we're just going to do 1024 again. Then you're going to save the image. That's good. We're going to go to the node, or actually to the properties, to the node. Okay, now as you can see, I didn't I didn't add any image texture to this, and I wanted to do that so it'll give me an error. So in case you guys get an error, because this took me like a little bit of time to figure it out when I had this error first come up on me. It says no active image found in material 002 for object cube 000. All right, so basically what that's telling you is add that image texture to every single material in that object. So as you can see on here, we added it here on the blue material. We didn't add it on the gray, or no, on the black, brown material. So remember, if your object has more than one material, you have to add this image texture to every material. Okay, so now let that bake. And then this is basically it for the tutorial. Well, I'm going to show you real quick, since the next part, the next video will be how to take these textures and put them into Unity. So if you're a game developer, you're going to want to watch that part. If you're not, I guess just skip it. But I am going to show you basically how to use those textures in Blender. So what you're going to do is, okay, now it looks like you got the cube and the table. And I mean, there's different settings on this too. I didn't really cover those, but like you can pack them and stuff. And I mean, it can make them a little bit more like compacted, I guess. But I just choose to use the defaults. You're really not saving anything. So on some things you are. On smaller items, you're really most of the times not going to be. So then we'll just resave over it. Back to object mode. Okay, so now let's move this over here a little bit. So I'm going to show you how to basically how do you use those textures in Blender you just created. And then the next video will show you how to use those in Unity. So what we're going to do is I just hit Shift-D on the keyboard and click, and then you can move this over. That's how we duplicate. And then what we're going to do is, they should be the same, okay? So then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the materials, remove, and that should just be nothing, okay? And then, so you make sure you remove all the materials off the object, that was, all the procedurals. Then you're going to click on a new material, and we can go to the node editor. I think you can do it in here, but I like the node editor. And then basically, we're going to go image, and then you're going to pick one of the images. So we'll just do the table one. And then hook up the color to the diffuse color. And then now when we render it, it should be exactly the same again. But it's now this time it's using the image texture that we baked out. And there we go. Obviously, it does look a tiny bit different. And again, that's just adjusting, you can adjust the colors, adjust the settings, just different stuff. It's going to be different for every scene. Basically, obviously, the light wasn't hitting it as direct, so it's a little bit lighter. So maybe I would make this a little bit darker. That way it'll come out like this at the end. So basically, if you're just using it as a placeholder for speeding up animations and stuff like that, you don't really need to worry about that. But if you're going to use it in Unity, maybe you want to change it. So that's basically how you use them in Blender. That's basically how you bake textures in Blender, and then that's how you use those baked textures in Blender. Now, the next video we're going to cover is how to use those baked textures in Unity. So thank you for watching, and that's it for this tutorial.